All right, so our first step here is going to be to make sure that only owners can see the share and edit buttons that we have on the note detail page, right? When a user who the note has just been shared with visits this page, we want them to just see the note and the content and not these buttons. Now, there are several ways to go about this, as usual, of course, but the strategy that we're going to use is this. If we go back to the notes page, notice that there are two separate ways that the user can get to the note detail page, right? They can either click on one of the notes under My Notes, which will take them to the note detail page, or they can click on one of these notes under the Shared With Me section, and that will also take them to the note detail page. Now, what we're going to do essentially is instead of having both of these actions take the user to the same exact route, we're going to create two separate routes, right, according to whether the note was in the user's My Notes section or whether the note was in the Shared With Me section. And this is just one of several ways to do it. We'll probably take a look at other ways later on to do this, but for now, let's just open up our application and open up our note detail page. Okay, now I mentioned that essentially what we're going to do is we're going to reuse this page on two separate routes, and we're going to make it display a little bit differently depending on whether or not the user owns the given note. So the way that we're going to go about that is inside the note detail page's props, we're going to add a prop called isOwner. Now you might be picturing that we're going to make some kind of network request to the server to figure out if the user is the owner or do some kind of logic here to determine what this prop should be, but it's actually going to be a lot simpler than this, as you'll see. What we're going to do is, let's open up the routes component here. What we're going to do is we're basically just going to create another route, just like we did for our note detail page here, except the path is going to be different. Now, the way that we're going to determine what the path will be is basically just which item here the user clicks on, what list that item is in. We'll get back to that in a second here, but first let's create that extra route. What we're going to do, we're just going to say protected route, and we're going to say isLoading equals isLoading. Can access will be equal to isLoggedIn, just like with the regular note detail page. Is logged in. Redirect to will be the /login route. And the actual path of this, instead of being notes/note ID like our regular note detail page, this is going to be /shared/note ID. Okay, so it's actually going to be an entirely different route that we end up sending the user to. So inside this route, we're going to display the note detail page without the isOwner prop. And we're going to add the isOwner prop to this note detail page up here because that will make it basically get displayed with those buttons. So now that we've done that, sort of bringing this full circle, let's go back to our note detail page. And what we're going to do now is we're going to use this isOwner prop to hide the pieces of the DOM that we don't want if the user isn't an owner, okay? So the way we're going to do that is we're going to go down beyond this isEditing thing, because this thing just won't be shown at all if the user is not the owner. And we're going to go down to this div here with the two buttons, the edit and share button. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use curly braces and say isOwner and that will basically take care of hiding these buttons if the user is not the owner. So just to demonstrate here, if we click on one of these notes here and just change this to shared /that note ID. Oops, and we need to actually run our application here. We'll do npm run dev. There we go. We see that this version of the note detail page now has no buttons on it, whereas if we go to just notes/note ID, we'll see that that now has the buttons. Okay, so which version the user sees of this page is going to have to be determined by the route that we send them to when they click on one of these items here, as I said. So the way that we're going to do that is by opening up our notes page. And if we scroll down to the bottom here, where we have our shared notes list, all we need to do now is we need to change this route to /shared/ID. Okay, so basically that'll just make it so that when the user clicks on one of the items in the Shared With Me list, it takes them to this shared page with the version of the note detail page that does not have that does not have any buttons. So let's click on that, and sure enough, we see that that takes the user to a page without buttons. If they click on one of the ones they own, that one has buttons. Now, I probably should mention here that this strategy isn't super secure just on the front end. The only reason we're really able to do this at this point is because we already have mechanisms in place on the back end to make sure that only the owner can edit a given note, right? So if we open up the update note route, for example, we're making sure that the user actually owns the note. And this is important here because if we go back to our note detail page without the buttons, right? If we didn't have any protection in place on the back end, a user could just go in here, change this to notes/note ID, right? A savvy user here could do that. And then they'd be able to click on edit and actually make changes to that note. Okay, and that's definitely not an ideal thing. But currently, since our server does have this user owns note thing in place, if we try and do that, right? If we say hacked and click save changes, nothing's going to happen, right? If we refresh, we'll see that no changes were made. And in fact, if we take a look at the inspector window here and take a look at the network tab and try and edit this, just do something there, say save changes, we're going to see that we get a 403 saying, yeah, you're not allowed to do that. Okay, so that's the idea here, and I just wanted to clarify that the only reason we're able to use this strategy on the front end is because we already have that mechanism in place on the back end to prevent unauthorized users from editing that note. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.